Before we start, you should know this might be scary stuff. The next part is just to teach you, and for fun. This is the real words from the Sean Diddy Combs trial that reporters wrote down what scary secret did Cassie Ventura's old helper find in the basement of Diddy's music place. Why did Jessica Monroe, who helped make Cassie look good from 2012 to 2018, suddenly quit her big job and go away from the music business forever? And what proof did she keep that the lawyers say is the missing piece that explains why people stayed quiet for so long in a story that has made the music business very upset? Jessica Monroe used to be really good at helping famous people look good. She worked with both Cassie and Diddy. But now she's telling scary stories about what she found under Diddy's shiny music business for over 6 years. Monroe made up stories about Cassie's job and her dating Diddy, while she was getting more and more worried about what was really happening behind closed doors. She didn't come forward because she wanted attention. She didn't come forward to get money. Monroe came as someone who didn't want to be there, who had spent years thinking about how bad she felt for helping what she and now says was a smart plan to make victims stay quiet and make people think everything was okay. I went into the job of helping famous people because I thought I would help singers tell their stories, Monroe said, looking a little upset instead. I ended up helping hide the truth about what was happening to someone. I was supposed to protect the choice to tell the truth wasn't easy. People close to the case say Monroe was first scared her job would be ruined, and she might get in legal trouble because of all the papers she signed that said she couldn't tell secrets. But when more and more people said bad things happened, and other people came forward to tell their stories, she called the lawyers with information about a hidden room she found under Diddy's music studio, a place that she says was used for things that had nothing to do with making music. If you think this information is helpful, please take a moment to like this video and follow our channel for more breaking news about this case. That's still happening. The courtroom got completely quiet as Jessica Monroe promised to tell the truth. The lights above seemed to make her professional clothes look sharper, which was very different from how uncomfortable she looked, being the center of attention. Diddy, sitting at the table with his lawyers, kept looking calm, though you could see he was tense in his jaw as Monroe walked. Witness chair. Nobody thought a person who helps with publicity would become such an important witness. The room was tense with everyone, looking at the witness chair until Monroe took out a shiny black folder from her briefcase. People gasped loudly. Even the judge leaned forward a little. No big announcement. No fancy moves, just Monroe opening to a page full of what looked like floor plan security rules and a detailed list of events that happened over many years until that moment. Monroe had stayed completely away from public life since she suddenly left her job in 2018. But something had changed. Maybe it was watching Cassie tell her story. Maybe it was the proof from other witnesses. Maybe it was finally feeling safe enough to talk about what she found. Whatever it was, Monroe was done keeping what she knew to herself. She wasn't going to the witness stand as a celebrity insider wanted attention. She was there as a communications worker who had stumbled onto information that completely changed how she understood her job in the music business. And when she started to talk, the courtroom wasn't ready for the step-by-step, detailed story of what she found under Diddy's music studio, because what Monroe told them about the hidden basement room, its real purpose, and the fancy systems designed to keep secrets, wasn't just shocking, it gave context and real proof that connected multiple victims' stories across years of alleged abuse, proof that explained how silence had been kept for so long. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with quiet conversations. The reporters hunched in their special rows and lawyers whispered plans as they waited for what was listed on the schedule as industry professional witness. But when the court officer announced Jessica Monroe, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people knew her name right away. Others whispered questions about why she mattered. But the way Monroe walked with purpose to the stand, her face professionally calm but determined, told everyone this wasn't going to be unimportant testimony. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who had been talking with his legal team, suddenly sat up straight. His attention completely focused on his former employee. Monroe promised to tell the truth. No. Eye contact with the defense table. She didn't even look in Diddy's direction. I understand how important what I'm about to share is, Monroe began. I worked as Cassie Ventura's publicist from 2012 to 2018, a job that required me to work closely with Mr. Combs and his team. I was responsible for creating their public story as both a couple and as individual artists. The judge let her continue. And from that moment on, the whole trial changed, because what Monroe was about to say wasn't guessing it. It wasn't information she heard from someone else. It was first-hand professional experience backed up by documented proof she had carefully saved. When asked to explain her job, Monroe gave surprising detail about how publicity and control work together. My official job title was Director of Publicity for Cassie Ventura, but in practice all decisions needed approval from Mr. Combs' team. I was responsible for setting up media appearances, managing their interview questions, creating social media content, and most importantly, making sure that any public appearances or statements matched the approved story about their relationship. The prosecutor approached carefully. Miss Monroe, can you tell us what made you leave your job in 2018 and why you've chosen to testify now? Monroe looked directly at the jury. I left because I found a room under Mr. Combs' recording studio that completely changed my understanding of what I was actually supporting through my work, and I'm testifying now because I've realized that my silence, even though I didn't mean it helped, make possible a system that caused a lot of harm. Diddy's legal team immediately said this wasn't allowed, arguing that any information Monroe got during her job was covered by papers that said she couldn't tell secrets. But the judge, after looking at the agreements, ruled that NDA cannot legally stop testimony about possible criminal activity. I've brought documentation, she said, pointing to her folder floor plans, security rules, and most importantly, a detailed record of what I found and how it connects to public statements I was told to create on Cassie's behalf. I've spent my whole career managing public perception, she said. I understand the difference between image management and systematic lying. What I found went far beyond normal publicity practices. She turned slightly toward the courtroom. This wasn't just about protecting a celebrity's privacy. This was infrastructure designed for control and forcing people to do things. Monroe told the courtroom that it started like many concerning discoveries with something that at first seemed innocent. It came through normal publicity work, the way she explained it. It was supposed to be a standard tour of the recording studio for a potential feature story, normal media relations. I'd been coordinating similar access for years, so I didn't question the extensive security protocols. But the moment Monroe accidentally got into a restricted area of the studio, she knew something was wrong. The main recording facility had state-of-the-art security. Fingerprint scanners, multiple checkpoints, constantly changing access codes. During a walkthrough for a planned media feature, I used a bathroom that was supposedly off-limits when returning. I took a wrong turn and found myself in a hallway with a keypad secured elevator that wasn't on any of the building plans I'd been given the second I asked about it. The security team became visibly upset. That should have been the first red flag. They said it was for archive storage, master recordings and valuable equipment. But their reaction felt like something else, like I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to know existed. She was walked back to the main studio areas. The professional atmosphere became noticeably tense. There were clear instructions never to mention the elevator to media representatives. It felt like everyone was watching to see if she would ask more questions. Monroe said that after that incident, she began noticing patterns in Cassie's behavior following studio sessions. It happened most dramatically after late-night recording sessions. Cassie would arrive at media appearances the next morning with what I now recognize as trauma responses: disconnection, memory gaps, physical discomfort. She would repeatedly say things like, "Yeah, I don't remember much from last night," or "The session is kind of a blur at the time. I thought this was because of the demanding schedule," and possibly recreational drugs I was told to schedule lighter days. After certain studio sessions with specific guidance to avoid close-up photography or extended interviews, the courtroom stayed silent as Monroe opened away. Her folder, I started writing down these patterns, dates, behaviors, specific instructions. I got about managing Cassie's public appearances following certain studio sessions. She read directly from an entry dated March 15th, 2016 post, Studio Day C, extremely withdrawn, told to cancel Jimmy Fallon appearance, citing vocal strain DC team insistent on 48-hour media blackout. When asked about C's, being told she's just processing new creative directions, C later texted asking if we could talk somewhere not in the building. Meeting never happened, DC team said she was resting and unavailable. Monroe paused. Collecting herself professionally over time, I began to see connections between these episodes and specific instructions about Cassie's public story, she continued, reading entries that documented increasingly concerning patterns, scheduled social media posts created in advance to give the impression of normal activity during periods when Cassie couldn't be reached, prepared statements about her passion for the creative process that she never actually said, and carefully staged photo opportunities designed to counter any potential rumors about her. Well, being the most important revelation came when Monroe described her eventual discovery of the basement facility in late 2017. I arrived early for a scheduled meeting and saw Cassie being walked from the elevator. I'd previously been told was for archive storage. She appeared confused and was being physically supported by 2 security team members. When she saw me, there was a moment of what I can only describe as desperate recognition, before a security member positioned himself between us. I was told she was feeling unwell after an intense creative session, and my meeting was rescheduled. This incident made me want to investigate further. Using the access I had as part of the publicity team, I looked at building plans filed with the city and found that the original construction included a big basement level that wasn't mentioned in any of the materials given to media or business partners. Through careful observation and by gradually gaining the trust of certain staff members, I eventually got access to the basement level. What I found was not archive storage. It was a fully equipped space with several different areas, a room filled with surveillance equipment watching multiple locations, a room with recording equipment that wasn't for music, production, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be living quarters with a bedroom that had no person but showed signs of regular use. Monroe said she continued her investigation quietly, realizing that direct questions would alert Diddy's team to her concerns instead. What she found through careful observation revealed a sophisticated system of watching and control. There were detailed protocols for handling situations, staff terminology for episodes when artists or guests became distressed, some involving specific sedatives, described as creative enhancers, some outlined as privacy maintenance. There were others that specifically addressed evidence management and narrative control. She paused, keeping her professional composure with visible effort. I began to recognize that my publicity work wasn't just promoting an artist. It was covering for something much more concerning. Monroe continued, her voice steady but tense. After discovering the basement facility, I got what felt like a test. Diddy's head of security approached me about a hypothetical PR situation involving compromising footage of an unnamed artist. He asked how I would handle media questions if such footage ever leaked. When I suggested standard crisis management protocols, he shared that they had more effective methods of ensuring such situations never reached the crisis stage. She thought it was just an abstract professional discussion until she got a USB drive at her office. It was unmarked inside, was what appeared to be surveillance footage from the basement facility. I almost couldn't process what I was seeing, but I was seeing. Made myself watch it. It showed Cassie in a clearly impaired state being recorded without her knowledge or consent. There was a voice off camera, recognizably Mr. Combs directing both her actions, and the recording itself, the footage ended with explicit instructions about leverage and ensuring continued cooperation. Monroe testified that viewing this footage changed her understanding of her role. I realized I wasn't just managing an artist's image. I was unknowingly participating in covering up systematic manipulation and potential abuse in her final months of employment. She observed increasing security around the basement facility and stricter compartmentalization of information staff who had previously been willing to discuss certain aspects of the operation suddenly became unreachable or were replaced. New NDA was circulated with substantially increased penalties for disclosure. She said that's when the ethical crisis intensified. I'd get calls at all hours about narrative adjustments. I maintained professional responsiveness. Then suddenly, I was being included in meetings about reputation protection rather than genuine publicity. I was shown evidence of what would happen to Cassie's career if she ever became uncooperative. I was told to draft statements. She would never see but would be released in her name if necessary. I knew what it was. It was preparation for potential damage control. They were creating a system where they could counter any allegations before they were even made, and so for months Monroe said nothing, while internally processing the ethical implications. She performed her duties, maintained her professionalism, focused on finding ways to potentially help Cassie. But every time I tried to create an opportunity for Cassie to speak freely in interview, without pre-approved questions, a social appearance without Diddy's team present, it would be intercepted and modified or cancelled. I realised the extent to which her public presence was being controlled. She looked around the courtroom. He didn't just manage her career, he created an entire infrastructure to monitor control, and if necessary discredit her. And that, Monroe said, was what finally drove me to leave the industry entirely. Monroe paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the microphone. It wasn't just the basement facility that was just the physical manifestation, she said. From that moment on, everything she did professionally felt like potential complicity in something deeply troubling. She explained that directives would come through the established publicity channels, specific narratives to maintain when she expressed concerns about the authenticity of certain statements attributed to Cassie. Things would shift behind the scenes. I'd raise an ethical concern on Monday, and by Thursday, I'd find access to Cassie restricted or my role in upcoming media opportunities diminished. She said this didn't happen once or twice, it became a recognizable pattern. He didn't have to issue direct threats to me. The system did it for him. The security team, the legal department, the management structure he had created an environment where questioning the approved narrative had immediate professional consequences. Monroe's voice took on a deeper, more resolute tone. I maintained my position for months after discovering the basement facility. I convinced myself I could potentially help by staying. But then I witnessed something that made continuing impossible, she said. The breaking point came during preparations for a major interview. I was finalizing interview parameters with a major publication, establishing boundaries that I had been told were Cassie's preferences. When I managed to speak with Cassie directly about these boundaries, she looked confused and said, "I never asked for any of that. I actually want to talk about what's really happening." Before she could continue, a member of Diddy's team interrupted and separated us. She described feeling a profound shift in her understanding. Then I got a call from Diddy himself, not from his publicity team, but directly he said, "Jessica, we need to be clear about something. The narrative isn't Cassie's to control everything goes through me. That's not negotiable." She described feeling like her professional world had collapsed. I realized in that moment that I wasn't serving Cassie's interests at all. I was unknowingly helping maintain a system of control over her public voice. Monroe said she spent several days reviewing all the evidence she had gathered: the basement facility, the surveillance systems, the prepared statements, the controlled media access. It was all connected, a comprehensive system designed to ensure that Cassie could never tell her own story. She said the breaking point wasn't fear. It was ethical clarity. I realized that continuing in my role made me complicit in something I found deeply disturbing. No career advancement or financial security was worth that moral compromise. She told the court she resigned immediately after this realization. I submitted my resignation, cited personal reasons, and declined the substantial financial incentive offered to extend my contract. I took only my personal notes and documentation of what I had observed, information I believed might someday be important if Cassie ever found the opportunity to speak freely. She looked at the jury. I wasn't just a publicist managing an image. I had become part of a system designed to silence someone's authentic voice and experiences. Then she looked briefly toward the defense table, and the basement facility wasn't just a physical space. It was representative of an entire operation built around control, leverage, and silencing for her final statement. The judge allowed Monroe to address the broader context of her testimony. She remained seated, her professional demeanor intact despite the emotional weight of her words. "You built a publicity machine that appeared to celebrate artists," she began. "You called it promotion. You called it career development. You called it brand building, but what I observed was a sophisticated system designed to control narratives and silence potential accusations. The defense team whispered urgently among themselves. Diddy maintained his composed expression, though a muscle visibly tensed in his jaw. I witnessed the gap between public image and private reality. I observed the methods used to ensure compliance Through surveillance and leverage, I documented the systematic approach to preventing authentic expression. You created infrastructure specifically designed to maintain control over how people could tell their own stories. Then Monroe referenced her years in publicity. These weren't standard industry practices. I've worked with numerous high-profile clients, the basement facility, the surveillance, the prepared counter-narratives. These went far beyond legitimate image management. Monroe addressed the jury directly. If you think this is just about celebrity publicity or image management, you're missing the true significance. This was about creating systems that made it virtually impossible for someone to speak their truth. Those systems relied on people like me participating often without fully understanding what we were enabling. Then she returned her attention to the court as a whole. The basement facility wasn't just about recording music based on what I observed, and the footage I saw it served multiple functions, creating leverage, monitoring compliance and generating material that could be used to discredit anyone who might speak out. She concluded her testimony and closed her portfolio, waiting calmly for further questions, and Diddy maintained his composed expression. But something had shifted in his demeanor because the testimony from someone who understood both the public relations machinery and the hidden infrastructure revealed the sophisticated nature of the control system that prosecutors had been working to establish. When Monroe completed her testimony, she didn't look triumphant. She looked like someone who had finally fulfilled a professional and ethical obligation that had weighed on her for years. The courtroom remained tense, processing the implications of her revelations. Even the judge appeared to be connecting this testimony to previous witnesses' accounts. Some of the jurors were taking extensive notes, and the defense team was huddled in intense conversation, clearly reassessing their strategy in light of this unexpected perspective on their client's operations. Monroe didn't engage with the press when she exited. She didn't make statements, didn't acknowledge cameras. She walked out of the courthouse with the same professional dignity with which she had entered, though observers noted she appeared visibly unburdened. When asked later by reporters if she feared professional repercussions, she reportedly responded, "There are professional consequences to speaking out, certainly, but there are moral consequences to remaining silent that I found more difficult to bear." But outside the courtroom, the impact was only beginning to register. Entertainment publicists held emergency discussions about ethical boundaries. Media outlets reassessed coverage of celebrity relationships. Industry figures with connections to Diddy issued carefully worded statements expressing shock and concern about the alleged basement facility behind closed doors. Entertainment lawyers analyzed the implications for non-disclosure agreements. Industry-wide public relations professionals discussed the ethical dimension of their work. And while many attempted to distance themselves from the case, social media was already examining years of carefully crafted public narratives with new skepticism. Previous testimony was being re-evaluated in light of the systematic control. Monroe had described Cassie's public appearances and statements over years were being re-examined for signs of the control. Monroe had detailed, and most significantly, the elaborate infrastructure designed to maintain Diddy's preferred narratives, physically represented by the hidden basement facility, was being recognized as evidence of premeditation and consciousness of guilt. The public wasn't just shocked by the revelations, they were processing a new understanding of how power operates in the entertainment industry, that the carefully crafted images they consume through media might be the product not just of standard publicity, but of sophisticated systems designed to silence authentic voices and experiences. The case against Diddy had expanded beyond individual allegations to reveal the infrastructure that had enabled years of alleged behavior. And as this trial continues to unfold, we'll bring you the most thorough and accurate updates available. If you found this report informative, please like and subscribe to our channel, because understanding is addending. The systems that enable misconduct is just as important as exposing the misconduct itself.